Well, so you wrote the book Flourishing Pastor, and I don't know, did you write it because of all the craziness, or was it already something that kind of God had put in your heart to help pastors in that way, or to have that kind of
Yeah.
thought on your heart?
Yeah. Great question. In God's providence, I published this book with InterVarsity Press, as I've done some of the other. And Amy Sherman, who's a very good friend of mine, her book comes out in May, which you got to have, Agents of Flourishing. And mine came out in December called The Flourishing Pastor. When InterVarsity Press, just a backdrop, since we worked with IVP, and I really love IVP and the team there, we talked about doing these two books. This was 3+ years ago.
Okay.
So this was pre-pandemic, and I had no idea when we started, nor did IVP, in its release date and writing it. And a good chunk of it I wrote during the pandemic, which actually, I'm not minimizing the pain of the pandemic, but it helped shut my travel down. It helped me focus. And so a good chunk I wrote during the pandemic. Yeah, we had no idea in writing the book, in framing it. And I do a little bit in the book about COVID, but I didn't want it to be centered in COVID. I wanted it to have a
Right.
longer shelf life. So yeah, we didn't know that was going to take place. And that was one of the amazing things I think maybe God is doing. We hope, like loaves and fishes, if he wants to multiply the book to help people, is that it came out in December.
Hmm.
And now it's just really getting some traction in a time when we're all wrestling. Pastors aren't doing very well, maybe before the pandemic, but now certainly it's been really stressful.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
seems
Yeah.
to be in God's providence, we hope, the timing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
I mean,
wasn't our
yeah,
smarts. It
pretty
wasn't our
pretty
smarts.
amazing. You're right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like it wasn't planned for it,
It
but it all
wasn't.
worked out, and it is a very relevant topic. I mean, I get to talk to a lot of pastors and church leaders of all types, and I've done a couple shows on kind of Christian counseling and
Yeah.
pastors getting help and things like that. And I think pastors have had a tough, we were talking before, right? I put them in that category of like any kind of frontline, whether it's firefighters or police or nurses or teachers, like pastors are kind of in that bucket. Like you're really on the front lines dealing with this stuff. And I like your phrase, right? It's a catch-22. Like, how do you,
Yeah.
whether you're mask or no mask, or politics or
Yeah.
racial
It's
tensions,
it's
like
really
it's
hard.
really hard to win.
You're caught in the
Like,
middle.
yeah, you're really caught in the
Yeah,
middle.
and
So,
these things matter, but they matter so much. And my wife is a mental health professional. She's a remarkable counselor. And she said in her practice and all her colleagues, she's highly professional, highly credentialed. And here's how she says it. She says that the pandemic has amplified the decibel level. So if you struggle
mm,
with anxiety, you were dealing with a certain kind of mental health dynamics, right? The pandemic, because of isolation, stress, just shot the decibel level up. And I think pastoral care has reflected that too, Frank. I mean, we on our staff, and we have, again, several campuses and we have a wonderful staff, but we've had to spend much more time and got helping people in their mental health and their marriages and things that are so stressful. So yeah,
right,
it's been really
right,
hard for
yeah.
everybody.
So, kind of jumping back to the book,
Yeah.
give us the overview. What's the book about, and kind of how is it geared towards helping pastors?
Yeah. Well, so my journey, I built the book. It's the first time I've written a book on one verse. It does have a Bible basic. So that I have been looking at a Hebrew idea ever since I first started studying Hebrew many, many years ago. And I've had an academic interest in this word. It's called tom tamim. It means wholeness or blamelessness or integrity. It's translated in the Bible. So I have an academic journey there in my doctorate and other work on this word. And then starting Christ Community, I really had this idea that the culture of which this church would want to emerge and leadership was centered in this tom tamim word. So the primary verse this whole book is about, Frank, is Psalm 78:72. It's referring to David, but it says, so David shepherded them according to the integrity of his heart and guided them with skillful hands. So this text, I think, is the most central text of biblical leadership in all of Scripture.
Hmm.
And what the book is built around is this text. Now, I bring other texts, other insights in leadership, but notice the progression. The biblical picture, is a paradigm that guides servant leadership, and the primary paradigm of leadership is shepherding. So I unpack that as a primary metaphor. That's the first part of the book, and I critique current paradigms that guide callings that are toxic, like celebrityism. I mean, I humbly and charitably critique where a lot of pastors lose their way first. And then I focus the second section of the book on integrity of heart. This is the tome lab, this tome idea of formation, wholeness. It's your spiritual life. You lead and live out of the overflow of your soul. So integrity of heart is a second section. And my wife said to me, when I wrote one of the chapters on pursuing wholeness for a leader, she said to me, and again, my wife is not a flatterer, but she said, of all the things you've written in that chapter, and maybe because she's a counselor and been a pastor's wife for a long time in a parachurch work, she said, that chapter on pursuing wholeness is the most important thing you've ever written. And so the middle part of the book is on this area of formation and wholeness, right? Because we lead and love and serve out of the overflow of who we are and who we're becoming. And then the last part of the book is some insights I think are really vital for skillful leadership. So integrity of heart, skillful hands. So that's the book flows around that verse and unpacks it as kind of the moniker or the guide.